This is the new PS5 Slim. Not only am I unboxing it, but I'm also taking it through an X-ray as well as full teardown to see what's inside. And honestly, it is not what I expected. This, my friends, is the brand new PS5 Slim. I say slim, but it's like, you know, lowercase s slim because it's still a little bit chunky. But it's really nice of them to include the latest Xbox exclusive with our PS5. What the hell is...
That's your plastic stand.
I bet a lot of people are gonna accidentally throw these things away because they're so small. This would be a great time to remind you to subscribe and ring the ding-a-ling button so you never miss when I give you a free code to Modern Warfare. All right, let's take a look at the PS5 itself. This is definitely a lot lighter weight. In fact, I like how the cardboard weighs almost as much as the PS5. So I've been very curious because I've seen like the photos and stuff of what this looks like, and they have a couple of like side-by-sides, but actually seeing it in person, well, it's smaller and it's glossier. So
it's half glossy, half matte?
it is half glossy and half matte.
Hi.
I will say though, that disk drive is quite bulbous. I mean, not to say that you should get the digital version just so you have a slimmer profile, but that's chungussy. We also do have a neat little PlayStation Easter egg on the bottom here. So you can see here that it is smaller, I would say, in every dimension. It's a sort of similar shape, although it loses this kind of like these wings, which I'll admit when I first saw the PS5, I thought it was really ugly, but it's kind of grown on me. This looks a lot more slimline. Something else you can tell here is that with the original PS5, they have these like little grills over like the fans and stuff. Here, I can literally just stick my finger all the way inside, which shouldn't make really a difference, but it does look maybe a little cheaper. I mean, it's not that much sort of shorter, but it is like significantly less thick. One of the main advantages of the PS5 Slim is that this disk drive is optional. So this obviously has it already pre-installed. Theoretically, you can buy a digital version and add it later. A couple other things I'm noticing here. So we do have slightly different USB ports. So on the original, we have one USB-C and one USB-A. That has been replaced with two USB-Cs, one of which shows that it is a 10 gigabit port. I assume that's probably more so for like PlayStation VR. If you watched our previous video last year when we took a look at the PS5 1200, what you'll probably know is that that was actually a significant upgrade. So this PS5 1200, even though it looks the same as every other PS5, has a way smaller motherboard, a 6nm processor, and I said it in the video. In fact, we can cut to the tape right now. You're trying to tell me that they couldn't make PS5 Slim today by just dropping it in there? Which makes me curious as far as, is this just the same on the inside? Did they literally take the exact same motherboard and just shrink the chassis down to what they could have already done? I don't know, but there's only one way to find out. So for context, this is a launch PS5 disc version, which comes in at a hefty 4.4 kilos. Now we contrast that with the 2022 version of the PS5, aka the 1200 disc, where you can see is it comes in at a significantly lighter 3.8 kilos. Now, theoretically, the PS5 Slim should be pretty similar if it's got the same motherboard and similar cooling inside. So we've got with this one, it is 3.1 kilos. This is actually a pretty substantial difference in weight, which really leaves you with the question of where did all that weight go? Let me actually take a look at the disk drive, because the disk drive with this PS5 is definitely something unique. Ah, okay. So it's on these little tabs.
That sounds like it's breaking.
It actually, I think it's fine. I think that's actually the way you're supposed to do it. So it pops off. As you can see here, we have access to the fan, as well as a large empty, wait, what? It's hollow. You see this? Why is it?
Stop fingering the PS5.
Okay. There's a little arrow. What's the arrow? How do you? Oh my God. What? Is that really that easy to just take off the disk drive? Hold on a second. Wait. You know what? Sony, I gotta give you guys props. That is legitimately cool. It's a weird sort of hybrid connector. It looks a little bit like SATA. Certainly this is proprietary, so you're not gonna be able to use this with anything else, but that is really, really simple. We can see now a little bit more of the actual size of the PS5 if you've got the digital version. Now oh God, that does not feel good. You literally pull them. Yikes. I understand why they did glossy, because everyone's gonna wanna buy the third-party plates, or really the Sony first-party plates, to replace this with like matte black and everything. That's why they did the glossy, so they want to sell you more shells.
On the good side of that, we can get some really cool combinations of like 4-color, bespoke.
True. Well, I will tell you, I don't think there's a lot in here. This feels, I mean, it even sounds hollow. If you wanna put the feet on it, it looks like that, which to be fair, they do click in okay. And then you've got your PS5, which sits like this. So I guess the feet aren't quite as dumb as I thought. I don't like the fact that you've got these huge seams and the big holes for the actual feet though. I mean, it's like the build quality on a Cybertruck. You're definitely not supposed to do any of this while it's on, and it's probably a little bit dangerous. But what happens when you plug in the disk drive when the PS5 is already on? Someone's gonna do it, right? Should go without saying, don't try this at home, but I am because I wanna know what happens. Okay, ready, and activate. Oh, interesting. Your disk drive wasn't connected properly. When connecting your disk drive, make sure to turn off the PS5 and unplug the power. So it just tells me to restart. Okay, so actually, that seems fine.
So the step right now is that the PS5 has been powered up as a digital version, but this is the first time it is going to be booting with a disk drive.
Oh, hey! Your disk drive is connected to your PS5. To use your disk drive, register it to your PS5. Should we try to do this without internet connection to see what happens? Yep. Can't use your disk drive. You need to connect your PS5 to the network to register your disk drive to your PS5. So, if you do upgrade / add a disk drive to your PS5, you do need it to at least be connected to the internet the first time. I think that is a one-time thing. So one thing I want to actually check to see is how much capacity each of these PS5s have. So as a reminder, the original PS5 only shipped with one option for SSD, which is 825 gigs, whereas the PS5 Slim has 1 terabyte out of the box. So with our PS5 Slim, we have 830 gigs of free space, and with this one we have 647. Wow, that's actually a pretty big difference. Now, let's put the PS5 head to head with the PS5 Slim. So I'm gonna do some very basic power testing. So first we're gonna just start out by just literally sitting on the menu. And you can see there is actually a small difference, but this is kind of margin of error. So we're getting about 49 to 50 watts on the PS5 Slim versus about 53 on our PS5 1200. I will say that that is not a substantial difference. I've done testing of several PS5s in the past. They're all a little different. So some require a little bit more voltage or whatever. A few watts is margin of error stuff. And keep in mind that this PS5 1200 that I'm comparing it to is the 2022 model. This is the version that was updated last year. This does have the 6nm chip. So if I had the original PS5, we would see different results, but I actually want to give the PS5 Slim the most fair shot going up against the 2022 model. Well, that sounds cool if I do two at once. Now, this is certainly a little bit of a crude test, but all we're looking for is a major difference. If this was a significantly updated chip or something, we would see 20, 30 watts difference, but what we're actually seeing is about 5. So our PS5 1200 is in the 217, 218 watt range. Our PS5 Slim is bouncing between 212 and 214 or so. I will say that's 100% within margin of error as far as I'm concerned, which isn't a huge surprise.
So we're now here with our friends at Creative Electron, where I will be X-raying the PS5 Slim. So a couple of things I want to know, but the main thing is what the actual layout of the motherboard is, and a little bit of an idea of what's in the inside before we do the full teardown. You can see we've already taken the side panels off of this one, and we're gonna do the same with the Slim, mostly because when it comes to putting in the X-ray machines, the more stuff we can get out of the way, the clearer image we're gonna have. Okay, so we've started out by putting both PS5s in a larger X-ray machine to get an overall image of what is on the inside, and then we're gonna put it in these other machines to get a little bit more of that fine detail. So right here on the right, you'll see that this is the last year's PS5. And you've got like things like the SSD, we've got the heat pipes, but on this model, while the heat pipes are in basically the same spot, it looks like the motherboard has actually been potentially like rotated around. The main downside with this PS5 image is that you can see it's a little bit darker on the bottom. That's because the disk drive is not removable on the original PS5, which means that we've got a little bit more clarity with the Slim. Now, one thing I can say immediately though, is that the PS5s do have different cooling assemblies. Looking at the outside of these PS5s, I would not have guessed that there was this level of difference. The heat pipes, look at the difference here, right? So heat pipes are just vertical, 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 horizontal, simple. On the new one, look at how much more complex the shapes are. See, it's like sort of weaving in and out and up and down, and like it's much more sort of a complex design, which does make sense. If you're basically cooling the same processor, and again, we've just done the power testing, they are basically pulling the same wattage. If you've got that same 220-ish watts that you need to dissipate, a smaller overall form factor, you do need, unless you want to, sacrifice either temperatures or fan noise, you do need a more complicated design to keep everything in check. And it looks like they actually have done the engineering to certainly do something which looks a lot more complex on the outside. So our friends at Creative Electron have very graciously let me take the controls with the PS5 Slim in the machine. So what we're looking at here is the actual SoC. So that's our CPU, GPU, everything. And obviously it's very dense because what we're looking at is our heat pipes on top. Look at the detail you can see on this. I'm not even zoomed all the way in. Like, that is wild. So I'm curious here. So you can actually see So where I am in the image is this is where the SSD would be mounted. And you can see the SSD mounting points are directly behind these heat pipes. Because you've got the heat pipes where pretty much all of the heat is being sort of exhausted out, because you've got airflow running through from sort of this direction. I'm curious if the SSD cooling is going to be any better or potentially worse on this PS5 Slim, because this is quite a dense area. So I think that's everything we need with the X-Ray. So let's take this back to the studio and tear down the PS5 Slim. It is time for the PS5 Slim to reveal its dark, dirty secrets. So we actually discovered a slight issue. The third time we took off one of these shells, we bent it back a little bit, but these little plastic little hooks started to bend back and it wouldn't go in. So we had to actually take some pliers and shove it back together. They're definitely ready to sell you some spare shells when you break yours. Boy, I don't like that noise at all. If it's anything like the previous PS5, these 4 screws will pull the entire fan out without having to go any farther. Hey, look, how many screws do you really need? The answer, not that many. And so now we should be able to just pull the fan out, and it does come out nice and neat. So for context, the old PS5 fan is 120 millimeters. The new one is 115 millimeters? That's a really bizarre change. Interesting. So you know what? There's also a difference in thickness. So the PS5 1200 fan is 50 mils thick, whereas the new one is 40 millimeters thick. So what we're looking at here is a fan which is smaller in pretty much every dimension, has the ability for air to flow all the way through, and has slightly more blades. You know what? We're finding all kinds of neat little things. Like, it's clear that Sony have not done a lazy job by designing the PS5 Slim. Like, this is a properly unique thing, even though it looks quite similar on the outside. Everything I'm seeing so far on the inside has been at the very least tweaked. Maybe not in a huge way. They've definitely learned stuff from the PS5 and decided to put that into the Slim. So yeah, this is definitely the warranty void sticker. So as I peel it up, it's got the little PlayStation logos on it. I honestly might be ready to start pulling the shell apart. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 screws. And oh yeah, look at that. Wow, 9 screws and we're just loose. Now, next step is we gotta remove it from the other side. I don't wanna jinx this right now, but this looks like it might be the easiest PS5 to open up and work on I've ever seen.
What is the Austin Evans repairability score?
So far, very good. All right, so this cable should connect to, I believe, our front USB-C ports. Yeah, there we go.
Hell yeah, look at that. Oh, wow.
And that, oh. I mean, I guess I'm not like hugely surprised because I just looked at it on the X-ray, but that looks really nice. Okay, all right, we'll put this off to the side for 1 second. The only other thing we have installed here is our power supply, which is just held in. Man, that is so simple. So for context, this is the power supply on a PS5 1200 compared to the Slim. They are, yes, they're the exact same 12 volt, 31 amp power supply. And all that you have on this are your USB ports, your power button, as well as your LEDs. Other than that, super simple. And of course, you've got your Wi-Fi and Bluetooth antennas, which I assume are just now run to the front of the chassis instead of on the bottom with the power supply. So also, theoretically, you may see slightly better Wi-Fi and Bluetooth performance since it'll be a little higher up in the PS5 and not attached to the bottom of your power supply. So there's a pretty substantial difference between the PS5 Slim motherboard and the PS5 1200. So not only is this just narrower, but the heat sinks are entirely different. It is a smaller overall heat sink. I think that's part of where our weight difference is coming from. So as you can see with the 1200, we have a small heatsink which is directly over our heat pipes, which is sitting on the top of the CPU. So the CPU is right underneath this here. Then we have a medium-sized heatsink and a larger tower. Well, we still have the larger tower here, which actually looks to be maybe even slightly bigger. But instead of having 4 heat pipes inside of it, it only has 3. And we're completely losing this middle heatsink. So instead, they've rotated it around. But also, it's a much more complicated layout. So you can see here that we have 6 heat pipes that go straight across and up. So with this, we have 5 heat pipes. And you can see they actually start here and they wrap down, around, and across. So some of them end, so 2 of them end here, but a few of them start here and go all the way up to the top. So in the back, we have a somewhat similar layout. So we have a heat pipe which starts here, wraps up, around, and then through our actual heatsink, which is in a different orientation compared to this one, but it's broadly the same thing. So it comes across here, runs up through here, and then the heat can sort of run out on this side. Even though our SSD is going to be right behind the actual heat pipe. There's no heat transfer. So you might be able to see, I couldn't tell this on the x-ray, but now that I have it out front. So there's literally a little shim to keep them from touching. So basically, your SSD is being cooled completely separately to your actual PS5. So all of the airflow, all of the heat, everything from this should theoretically not really attach over to this side. Although I guess if people are having SSD problems, that would be the #1 spot that I would expect, because it is close to what I'm assuming is a very hot heatsink and heat pipe. Okay, so the slim motherboard and heatsink assembly weighs just under 1 kilo, so 0.97, whereas the older PS5, 1.1. So they did remove a couple hundred grams of mass from not only this metal shield, the smaller motherboard, but realistically the cooler, I think, is gonna be a lot of that. This is the 4th PS5 in a row that has had a physically smaller heatsink assembly. Time to start pulling out the very, very, very many tiny screws holding these motherboards together. Hey-oh, there we go. So that is the back, and now look at all the little bits of thermal pads, or thermal paste. So we're gonna undo the retention bracket, which I definitely didn't forget about at all. Oh! What do they say when they like strike oil? Not timber, but like, you know.
There she blows.
There she blows. Oh no,
There she blows, and that's a whale.
Inside we have the PS5. Wow, that is real chunky. So this is the 2nd generation of the chip inside of the PS5. So both the PS5 1000 and 1100, which came out in 2020 and 2021 respectively, had the original 7nm chip. In 2022, when the 1200 came out, they shrank it to a 6nm chip, which is slightly smaller, slightly more power efficient, and clearly that chip, we'll open this up to confirm, but that chip should be exactly the same between the two of these. Comparing the motherboard of the PS5 Slim to last year's 1200 model, there are some interesting things to note. So broadly speaking, they're actually very similar, but they're totally different at the same time. So the main thing is that the size is almost the exact same. They're a little different if I put them kind of like on top of each other, but the main difference is that they rearranged literally everything on these boards. The ports are in a different spot, the CMOS battery's in a different spot, Wi-Fi card. The only thing that's almost the same is going to be where you connect your power supply, but that just makes sense because that's on the bottom of the PS5. Probably the biggest difference I see is with the SSD. So this newer PS5 has a 1TB SSD, but it actually only has 4 total NAND modules, whereas the older model actually had 6. Now it's a smaller SSD, and theoretically that would hurt performance, although in practical terms, they probably can have, like, it will probably have the same throughput. So when it comes to the teardown, what we're getting here is a more compact design. So everything is smaller, and that largely seems to be okay. I mean, with previous models like the PS5 1100, they just took the PS5, chopped half the heatsink out and called it a day, which I was not a huge fan of. This time around, while yes, the fan is smaller, yes, the heatsink is a little bit more of an optimized layout with a little bit less sort of volume and mass, it does seem like they've compensated for that with a more complex layout with better airflow. Now, when you consider the fact that this is essentially a complete replacement, so you will no longer be able to buy the older fat PS5s, the Slims are going to entirely replace them, and that's kind of happened at a bit of a price increase, is a bit concerning. I mean, I love the fact that the disk drive is removable for repairability, for future upgrades, but I don't necessarily know if that's worth paying more. And honestly, everything I'm seeing here, while they've done a lot of nice engineering work to make it a little bit smaller, a little bit more compact, yada, 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 but also it's made it cheaper across the board. You know, it's got a smaller fan, it's got less of a weighty heatsink, they've trimmed and tweaked, they've removed those little vents that used to be on the top side. So I don't think necessarily that I could say that the PS5 Slim is better. It feels like it's a side grade. There's nothing really wrong with it. But the fact that it is more expensive definitely makes me a little hesitant to give it like a huge thumbs up, especially because there's almost certainly a PS5 Pro on the horizon next year, which should be a legitimate actual upgrade over what we're looking at here. But if you want to know more about that, make sure to subscribe to the channel and ring-a-ling that ding-a-ling button, because the PlayStation shenanigans, well, you arm me with a screwdriver and I can't help myself.